Good evening. Good evening once again, and welcome to Westwood and to UCLA, and to UCLA History Presents, a UCLA Veterans Remembrance. Welcome to our campus and to the Department of History's presentation of a Veterans Remembrance. My name is Abel Valenzuela, and I proudly serve as Dean of Social Sciences. Through observance of Veterans Day, it first became a national legal holiday in 1938 to honor veterans of the First World War. It was then President Dwight D. Eisenhower who in 1954 issued the first Veterans Day proclamation to make November 11th, 2 days ago, a day to honor American veterans of all wars. In the proclamation, President Eisenhower stated, "The national holiday is to ensure proper and widespread observance of this anniversary. All veterans organizations, and the entire citizenry who wish to join hands in this common purpose." Today, we are here to do just that. In addition to hearing an amazing story of UCLA veterans, more specifically, but our campus and how it's made contributions in this very important space. And of course, we are grateful to all of you for attending this very special event. I also want to extend thanks to our multiple departments in this space, including history and the military science, including naval science, aerospace studies, and UCLA's Veterans Resource Center. I want to thank them for their support and for tonight's program. They occupy a very, very important space at UCLA, and it's an honor for me to work with them. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague and good friend, the chair of the History Department, Professor Kevin Teresano. Kevin.
Thank you so much, Dean Valenzuela. It's a true pleasure to be with you all this evening. I am the chair of the UCLA Meyer and Rini Luskin Department of History, and we are proud to present this program at UCLA Veterans Remembrance, Conflict, Captivity, and Peace. Mr. Luskin expressed his interest to be here tonight as a World War II veteran, but he's traveling on the East Coast, and so he sends his best wishes to our program. Tonight's program is really special because we're about to hear the fascinating story of UCLA students who joined World War II following the attack on Pearl Harbor. As with many stories involving historic events, it was impossible for those involved to have known what their futures held and the impact that their actions and sacrifice would have on so many people. The remarkable story we will hear tonight involves Lieutenant Wesley Williams, a UCLA student, and his connection to Joseph Pesson, a French POW in the war. This story was brought to us by William W. Bill Palmer, an alumnus of our history department who has dedicated his career to righting wrongs and giving a voice to the voiceless. Bill has taken 7 petitions to the United States Supreme Court with Harvard professors Lawrence Tribe and David Shapiro. With 2 published decisions from the High Court, Bill has roughly 40 published and unpublished decisions nationwide. Throughout his career, Bill has written several laws and treaties, including the Holocaust reparations treaties among the United States, Israel, and Europe. He has also drafted humanitarian laws and written laws for the United Nations. At a young age, Bill served as the General Counsel on Insurance and Chief of Staff for the California Department of Insurance. He is widely recognized for his work in a series of federal lawsuits that challenge the constitutionality of California, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware's unclaimed property law. His efforts resulted in a federal injunction that closed California's unclaimed property division and forced the rewrite of the law to protect the public. But Bill is also notable for his dedication to pro bono and civil rights work. When he returned from Iraq, Bill sued the acting U.S. Secretary of State on behalf of families who lost sons in Iraq to kidnappers. This case led to the overturning of the United States hostage policy announced by President Obama before he left office. At UCLA, Bill majored in history and political science, was a member of the Theta Chi fraternity, rowed on the UCLA varsity men's crew team, and was a member of the UCLA Honor Fraternity, formerly Blue Key. He went on to receive his law degree from McGeorge School of Law. Finally, Bill is also a single father to 3 children, and it's my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome to the podium Bill Palmer, who has organized this event and really brought it to the attention of the Department of History and deserves all the credit tonight for this special event. Bill.
Thank you for all of you for being here. I listened to the dean, Dame Adele Valenzuela, Kevin Terracino, and when I was a student, I would have been a little bit nervous being around them. But here we are, and I'm grateful. I also want to thank Peter Evans, who can't be here. He's the Social Sciences Assistant Dean of Development, Director of Events Hilary Nadwani, Mick DeLuca, the Associate Vice Chancellor, who's seated in the back, Dervla McDonnell, Director of Development for Student Affairs, and Lindsay Goldstein, Director of the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life. I really need to thank my staff who's here. They did the lion's share of the work. Clement Souris, Clem. And Cherise Bilani. Please stand. At 260 total war dead, UCLA suffered the greatest number of casualties in World War II of all colleges and universities in the United States, with the only exception being Harvard. If you consider that UCLA was a fairly new college established in 1929 at this site with 5 new brick buildings on an open plain and a comparatively small student population, then the UCLA likely suffered the worst student losses pro rata in the United States. And I credit Bill Beagle for this research. 7 of those casualties were women students, nurses, and what were called WAVES, Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Services, which places UCLA at the top in terms of female students lost in the war. This research is according to UCLA military historian Bill Beagle, who is seated in the front row. While a student at UCLA, I never knew any of these facts that follow, though I lived in the same house and probably in the same rooms as one or more of the men in this story. I used to sit in that old fraternity house and wish that there were some heroes that had come out of that place. I did not realize that decades later I would learn how brave those men were and the sacrifices that they and their families made. There's a famous quote from a World War II reporter and Peabody Award winner, Elmer Davis, that this nation will remain free only as long as it is the home of the brave. In the next 20 or 30 minutes, I'm going to tell you a story. But before I do, I would like you to keep 3 themes in mind, which are also the same themes that I tell my children. First, we are indeed a reflection of the friends we keep. Second, if you positively impact the lives of 10 people, and they in turn impact the lives of 10 more people, and so forth, then in 6 generations, or roughly the wingspan of your great-grandfather to your grandchildren, you will have impacted the lives of 1 million people. 10 to the 6th power. Think about that as I tell you the story of these men. And the final point that I make to my children, that the goal in life is to leave the campsite cleaner when it is time for all of us to leave. There's a lot of work that went into this, and I need to give thanks to the partners around the world that helped me. Bill Beagle, obviously, initially I went to my fraternity, they helped, but it was Bill Beagle who was able to help me decipher the military records, order them from all the federal agencies, and help me put them together into something that was coherent. Plus, he lended me decades of his experience and all that wealth of information. Next, I had to track down Diana. In a letter we'll read together shortly. And so I went to a location firm, an asset location firm that I do a lot of business with in Manhattan. I asked for the help of Peter Quinn, Christina, Rudy, and Mark Ryan. And without hesitation, they said, "Bill, we're happy to help you." And they were the ones who helped me track down Diana, the unborn child of Lieutenant Williams. I also had to locate the French child, the French POW, so I contacted the firm that I work with in Paris, and Antoine Debka and Anne Aubert helped me in Paris, and they helped me locate the French POW's daughter, who you'll hear from at the end of this presentation. People Finders, Rob Miller, he's the chairman and CEO of the corporation. It's one of the biggest in the United States with 50 million customers, and he's a dear friend to me, and he helped me do all the background research as a favor. I want to turn to the Department of History and the impact that it had on my life. I like to think that every little fiber, each one of these people lent a fiber to my paintbrush. So the rest of the strokes that I took with my life, there's a little piece of them in everything. Not pictured is my history professor, Greg Foster, high school history professor. And then Mortimer Chambers was my freshman history professor. And he used to say to me, "Bill, you must go to Delphi in Greece, and you must stay until all the buses filled with blue-haired ladies have left." And he said, "And then you will know Delphi." And I actually made it to Delphi, and I sent him a postcard. I said, "Mr. Professor Chambers, I made it to Delphi, and the buses filled with blue-haired ladies have left." Robert Dallek, he's a major publisher. I was lucky enough to be in his class with 15 students. He's published countless books. Brilliant writer, brilliant man, took an interest in me. But my favorite is Professor Appleby, and she impacted my life dramatically. I was in one of her seminars with about 15 people as well. And if you ever saw that movie Good Will Hunting, and there's this argument in the bar scene where they argue over the history of the founding of America, all of those books in that bar scene were the books that she taught me. And she might have well have been Good Will Hunting. And she used to say to me, "Remember, Bill, it's not the books you read, it's the questions you ask." And she said to me, I had to do a major thesis paper. And I did the paper, and she required us to meet mid-semester and go over the paper with her. And I sat down with my paper, and she said, "Bill, your paper is sloppy, poorly sourced, and nothing more than a regurgitation of your classroom notes in the textbook." And she said, you have to go deeper into the first party sources. She said, those who were there, this is where you will find the meaning of history. And with those words, she altered my life. When I wrote the Holocaust reparations treaties, and I got into the German files, and I looked at the files of the bank records and the insurance policies, and in all those numbers was a little red R or a little red D hidden in those numbers. And that's so that the Nazi government could identify Rachel, which meant a female Jewish woman, or David, a male Jew, so that when it came time for them to go to the camps, they could take their property. And I went deep into all of the data, and that's how she helped me to write those treaties. So I thank the UCLA History Department for everything that they did for me, and I passed it forward. Turning to the most dangerous UCLA Westwood in the 1980s. This is my era, and I titled this The Most Dangerous Intersection. I drove up to the corner of LeConte and Westwood Boulevard with two of my dearest friends, Brian and Mike, and there was a handsome African-American man, and he ran running across Westwood Boulevard, and I'd never seen anyone run like that. It was as though he was doing ballet, and he had a silk white shirt, and he got into this beautiful Rolls Royce with a convertible and sat down behind the driver's wheel, and I turned to my friends in the back seat and I said, "Did you see the way that man ran?" And my friend Brian Waters turned to me and he said, "Willie, don't you know who that is? That's O.J. Simpson." And that was my first at the entrance of UCLA. But I also call it, and this is a discussion for another day, but I also call it, call it the most dangerous intersection because, and this is a 6,000-pound gorilla in the room, is that every year the universities in the United States lose about 2,000 students. They pass for all manners, drug overdoses, suicides, car accidents. And so it's a very dangerous time because of the way our society is structured, where the students move up through schools and then they leave the comfort and safety of their home and they literally jump into a city. And when I showed up at that intersection, I'd never been to a place like UCLA. I went to a little quiet high school where my entire high school could fit in one of these lecture auditoriums. So here I was at the threshold of this 36,000 person university that was a miniature city, and I was 18 years old. And then to complicate matters further, it was tough to get housing. You're a brand new student, couldn't get classes, and I was lost. And I had these two friends with me. So we went to a pizza place, and then we wandered up Gailey Avenue. And the first fraternity I came to, there were all these big parties. I didn't know what this was about. There were rush parties for these fraternities. And I walked up the steps, and the guys were very kind to me. And they said, "We'd like you to join, and we'd like you to pledge." And I said, "Okay, but you have to take my two friends." And they said, "Well, we like the redhead guy, but we're not so sure of the blonde guy." And I said, "Well, it's all or nothing." And so I got a room upstairs in the pledge dorm with bunk beds. But the fraternity took care of me. They assigned a senior to look out for me. I had meals. Everything was very reasonable. They had a social program. I had a big brother. He would show up on Sundays and make me go to church, and was very funny. And so it was a wonderful experience for me. And in fact, I never laughed so hard as I did during those times there. The place was filthy. I'd been in a boarding school. I'd gone to a boarding school, which I thought was dirty, and this place made that look clean. But I had so much fun, and the fraternity was run like a small business. You had meal plans, and you had everything that you would need to run a small business with a budget. There were weekly meetings, everything run according to Robert's Rules of Order, and all those lessons translated into my experiences, for example, in Iraq, how to motivate people, how to make them laugh. There's a saying, every piece of laughter is a miniature vacation. And when I was, working in Iraq to motivate all my team, to make it fun for them. So that's the fraternities and the sororities. They move hundreds of thousands of students through this university safely, and my entire fraternity graduated. So that's the lesson of the fraternities. Flash forward. Well, I wanted to go back. Clem, if you could take me back. Take me back to, this is Dr. Martin Luther King. If you could take me to the next slide. This is taken on the balcony, the same balcony where he was assassinated the following day, April 4th. And you see all the men surrounding him are all members of fraternities. They're called the Divine Nine, the top black fraternity and sororities. And if you ever watch a civil rights protest, or when you ever see the leader, you'll often see those letters on their lapel. And Martin Luther King, in his own writings, was heavily influenced by his involvement in Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. I wanted to share that with you. Gailey Avenue, there's the fraternity right there, one of them, and there's our fraternity. So. This is where I first learned. This was decades later, in about 2013, 2011. I came back to one of the reunions. I hadn't been to one in quite a while. And a little old man, an Army Ranger, in an Army Ranger uniform, he walked in rigid. He walked up to the microphone, and he had this smile and twinkle in his eye, and he said, "I'm proof that if you live long enough, you can be president of anything." And then he proceeded to tell the story about how he made 5 opposed beach landings against the Japanese in the Pacific. And he was an Army Ranger, and he was attached to MacArthur's staff. And because he was Army Ranger, he was first on the beach. And he would have direct radio contact with MacArthur's staff on the conditions on the beach as a first wave in. 5 opposed landings. And when I read his passing, his obituary talked about his family. It didn't mention a word about the fraternity, which one would expect. But it talked about his proudest accomplishment, which was that he was one of the first American soldiers into Hiroshima after the atomic bomb. And his proudest accomplishment was that he helped to rebuild the Jesuit church at ground zero of the atomic bomb, that he with his own hands helped to rebuild the Jesuit church. And you'll see the Jesuit church right there. When he was done talking, he sat down next to me and he said, "Bill, I have to tell you though, one thing I didn't share, there were a lot of men who left who never returned." He said, and they trickled off, and then they all came back one by one, and they were changed men. They had aged dramatically. Some of them were disfigured, had lost limbs. They wore pieces of their military uniform, but they really didn't fit in with the young men in the fraternity anymore. So it was touching. He told me, and next slide, Clem. Oh, did we miss the one with the fraternity? Did we go into the, could take me back to the one with the fraternity and take me into the meeting. This is take me into the meeting if it's possible. This is a story he told me. He said that the day after Pearl Harbor, all of the fraternity men went down into the chapter room and they had a meeting. And they discussed the meaning of the fraternity creed, which is an oath that all the fraternities, each one has their own creed. But it talks about, it talks in essence that we extend the helping hand and never looking down on another man unless you're reaching down to pick him up. And it's the words that are recited over and over again. And the men sat in that conference room, in that chapter room, and they debated this creed. And they said to themselves, essentially, are we just a social club that drinks beer? Or is this have a higher meaning to us? And so they framed the question, which was that they would all enlist in the United States military the day after Pearl Harbor. And then it was put to a vote, and the ayes had it. They all was unanimous, and they all filed out the front door of the fraternity, and they joined the U.S. military. These are the 7. That's the national banner of UCLA and the fraternity, and those are the 7 men that never returned. And all of those 56 men that held that vote, they were all heroes. As I researched them, they were fighter aces. They were amazing men. I'll talk about them near the end briefly. And we're going to talk about Wesley Williams. He's one of the 7. And I'd like Diana and her husband, Jay, to come up and have a seat if you don't mind.
You can hear better out of this room. Exactly, you know, coach or something.
If we could just move through the pictures. Here's Lieutenant Williams as a young boy, growing up with his mother, his father, as a Boy Scout. This was done in September after the vote. These are 2 of his fraternity brothers from Theta Chi, and they went on a hike near Yosemite, and he met his college sweetheart, who was in a sorority, Alpha Gamma Delta, on the other side of campus at UCLA, and they got married. This is their engagement. He wanted to get married before he went to war, and there he is, and you can see he did quite well for himself. She's a cutie, and there they are in romance, and there he is getting ready to leave. And he was shipped up to, I thought all these men would have gone into one division, but they were like oil and water. They spread out, and the government put them wherever their skill set took them. So Lieutenant Williams, Wes Williams, he ended up in northern Oregon to form a brand new division called the 104th Infantry Division, the Timberwolves. And he was on the original parade ground in late 1942. And there were 825 officers. He was one of those 825 men on this parade ground. They literally built the camp from the ground up with plywood and 2x4s. And then they trained, and eventually they built the division up to 18,000 men training in northern Oregon, the Timberwolves. Then they were loaded onto 19 trains, and they took 3 different routes across the United States to New Jersey, where they were loaded onto 55 ships with all their military equipment, their trucks, their artillery, all of their supplies, and they went across the Atlantic Ocean, which took 7 days. And they landed in Cherbourg. This was after D-Day. D-Day was on July 4th, and they landed in September. And what they saw in Cherbourg was they saw a lunar landscape. All the bombs that fell on these cities didn't just level the buildings, they blew every blade of grass away, every tree, every leaf. So these men, this was their first experience, landing directly in France, in Cherbourg, and this is what their welcome was. This was their first view. They were into the maw of war. They marched across France. They had a series of battles, and this is the battle in which Lieutenant Williams won his Silver Star. I went and had the records declassified. They were all restricted, and there you can see, and we're going to read this later, but you can see there is Second Lieutenant Wesley Williams, and that's a confidential order awarding him his Silver Star. No one has seen this until now, almost 80 years later. Lieutenant, and we had, this will be presented to Diana later, but this is his Silver Star, and it will be presented by an honor guard at the conclusion. So there he is, he led his men. His little Company A was surrounded in that town by the Germans, and he held his men together, and it was very cold. They wore cotton uniforms back then and leather shoes, and their water would saturate and they would freeze. This is later. This is the Ardennes offensive. This is where Lieutenant Williams was badly injured. He was hit in the arm and the chest, and his men couldn't. He was right in the forefront of the last of German offensive. Hitler stripped his eastern front of all his best divisions, and he decided he would recreate the 1940 invasion of France and try to divide the British and Americans by driving once again through the Ardennes forest. All the divisions came through the Ardennes forest, surprised the Americans, and Lieutenant Williams' small Company A was right in the path of the German divisions. And it showed you how insane Hitler was, because he was betting on the bad weather to immobilize the Allied airplanes. And you have to think, what kind of man would bet the future of his country on a weather pattern? So Lieutenant Williams was badly injured, hit in the shoulder and the chest, and he was captured. His men left him behind because they were too scared to move him. Lieutenant Williams is taken to Stalag 9 near Eschwege, Germany. He's badly wounded. The camp commandant calls for somebody who has the same blood type as Lieutenant Williams, and that's Joseph Pizan, a French POW. And so he comes. These are pictures of the prison camp taken by Joseph Pizan, his daughter. Like Lieutenant Williams, Joseph Pizan, Private Williams, had one daughter, who we'll hear from shortly. And these are pictures she shared with me. They were given some recreational time to go swimming and things like that, but it was really, this was a prison camp. Back in California, Russ Williams, Wes Williams' father, is writing to the military frantically, "Can you find my son? I've got a letter from the French POW that was sent to us by the Red Cross." And there's a letter. That's my handwriting. And it's very touching, this letter. If you could back up for a minute, Clem. He talks about his last moments with Wes Williams, what a good man he was, how kind he was, that he was a student at UCLA in Los Angeles, that he talked, that I've underlined, that's all my handwriting on that. It's taken from the files that Bill Beagle helped me pull. You'll see he says, he talked, before dying, he spoke a great deal of his wife who was expecting a baby in the month of March. His last words were for her. And then there's something important here that's critical. And if you see the original, I underline that with red, but the original is underlined in red, because this hit a warning sign to the U.S. military. It talks about a cemetery in a special corner of Eschwege, and that his grave has no mark. So Lieutenant Williams was buried in an unmarked grave, and he's declared missing in action. So here is Russ Williams frantically trying to get his son, recover his body, and you will see his file is filled with letters from the family frantically asking for help. And here's a letter from the Army lieutenant colonel telling them that they found the remains of his son in Germany. But it led to an investigation. That letter that Joseph Pizan wrote triggered a high-level investigation of that German prison camp. And you'll see they interrogated the burgermeister of the town. They sent in an entire army unit, and they began to excavate the cemetery. There's the death certificate from the German prison camp for Wes Williams and his death in 1945. And that letter from that French POW led to the discovery of, and the French, Joseph Pizan, the French private, he did not realize that letter. He was trying to help Wes Williams but they excavated the cemetery and they found the remains of 21 other Allied soldiers, Dutch, French, one Czech, and there are their names. So Joseph Pizan, through that kind gesture of writing the letter for Wes Williams to save the suffering of Wes Williams' family, didn't know it, but he helped 21 families find closure. There's the excavation of the camp, of the cemetery outside the prison camp. Report of the investigation, and you'll see up there, I believe it's in there, you'll see a reference to the letter. You see they're all buried outside the concentration camp. And you'll see the letter attached from Joseph Pizan to that report. And that's what led to the discovery of Wes Williams and the other 21 men. You also see, I want to point to the date at the top of the letter. This is 4 years after the war that they're wrapping this up. And so as a result, Wes Williams, his heroism fell through the cracks. He never received the commendation for the Silver Star that he had received. His family never received the military honors and the flag of our country. All of that was lost because of the fact that he was buried in an unmarked grave. This was always sad to me, this piece of paper. He had this beautiful wife at home, and Clement, if you could. And they sent his personal effects back home to his wife, a sleeping bag, badly mildewed and oil-stained, one comforter torn and oil-stained. And that's what his wife received from her husband. Those were his personal effects. The others, I'm not going to go through, there were a lot of other men, but this was another Rosetta Stone. I was out to dinner, and I got a call from the national president of my fraternity, the board of directors, and I ended up the national vice president of the board of directors, and his name's Dick Elder. And during meetings, I always used to lean over into Dick Elder. I always used to lean over to Dick Elder and say, Dick, you know I'm one bullet away from being president. Macabre joke. Anyway, Dick called me up and he said, Bill, there's something on eBay. I should also say it quick before I forget. That company A that Wes Williams saved in that little town, and that, remember I told you about if you help 10 people and they help 10, they went on to liberate Dora Mittelbau concentration camp. That little company A with the division, the men that he saved, and they impacted the lives of those prisoners. They were, his division ended up attached to Patton's 3rd Armored Division, and went in and they were the ones who liberated that concentration camp. And as you know, I wrote the Holocaust Reparations Treaty, so I became more familiar than I wanted to with the different death camps. But that is a true death camp. When you went there, you never returned. So it was his little company A that was one of the teams that liberated that camp. If you could move to the next slide. Go down, please. This was a Rosetta Stone. The national president called me up and he said, Bill, there's something on eBay that you've got to buy. It looks like it's a scrapbook from your fraternity at UCLA, and it says Theta Chi, and it has a little mouse on the front. And he said it looks like it's circa 1940 to 1941, right within the time frame that we're talking about, 1940 to 1942, I should say. And so if you can turn to the page. Inside were all the scraps. Please go up. Please go up to the top one. Yeah, right there, just stay with me for a minute. This was kind of the equivalent of Facebook in today or Instagram. And the men were telling their stories in these little slips of paper. And there was a man putting these little slips of paper together and circulating them among all the fraternity members. And you'll see up at the middle one, the man is talking about that he's aboard the USS Indianapolis, and he's loving it because he's seen the world. Well, the USS Indianapolis was the cruiser that delivered the atomic bomb to Tinian. And there's a famous scene in my fraternity brother Steven Spielberg's movie called Jaws, in which Quinn, the captain, talks about the Indianapolis, that after they delivered the atomic bomb, it was so secret that their ship essentially had been removed from the board. Nobody knew where the Indianapolis was. And they were sent from Tinian to Guam. And as they were crossing the ocean, they were hit by 2 torpedoes from a Japanese submarine. And they sank in under 8 minutes without being able to get a distress signal out. And so roughly 1,100 men went into the water. And the first day at dusk, they saw the shark fins. And they estimate that roughly 1,000 to 5,000 sharks descended on those men in the water. And they floated in the water for 5 days. They were losing 6 men a day, 6 men an hour to sharks. And so out of the 1,200 men on the ship originally, 300 were pulled out alive. Clem, if you could take me to the one slide, all the way down to the book, please. If you could take me to the book, please. It's probably up at the top, right there. This is a famous book called In Harm's Way, the story of the USS Indianapolis. Here are all the men. The asterisk next to their name signifies that they survived. And there you see Clarence Benton, my fraternity brother from Theta Chi at 663 Gailey Avenue, was one of the 300 survivors. If you could take me back up to I'll just share a few more of these. One of the men, as you see, joined the RAF or was trying to join the RAF, the Royal Air Force. I'm not sure what happened to him, but none of the Americans who joined the Royal Air Force survived. You'll see references to, this one's interesting, the bottom one. My young fraternity brother's talking about working for Colonel William Donovan and working with him closely. William Donovan was the founder of the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. William Donovan, his nickname was Wild Bill Donovan. And if you go to Langley in Virginia, there's a statue in the entryway of Langley at the CIA headquarters to William Wild Bill Donovan. And so there you see a member of the fraternity is now working closely with him, and then moved to Fort Ord and then Pearl Harbor and out while working for Wild Bill Donovan. You see the Marine Corps up here. If we go to the next one down, you'll see Midway, men stationed on Midway Island. They don't know that they're right in the center of it, that the Japanese Navy, after attacking Pearl Harbor, is heading towards Midway, and they're right in harm's way. People don't realize that Pearl Harbor was just one of 8 attacks on the December 7th. It wasn't an isolated attack. People also don't realize that those 8 battleships that were sunk in Pearl Harbor were all obsolete, and that the United States was ranked 19th militarily after Nicaragua. In 1940, the year before Pearl Harbor, the U.S. manufactured 18 tanks. So those young men who went into battle with obsolete weapons, obsolete planes, torpedoes that didn't fire or work properly. Meanwhile, the Germans and the Japanese had been studying history and studying our country carefully, and had night tactics, the long lance torpedo, the Zero fighter, and were superior in every way. And when the young men went into battle in the Pacific initially, and against the Germans, they were outnumbered 7-1. So not only were they flying obsolete planes and obsolete equipment, but they were outnumbered, for example, at Guadalcanal, 7-1. And that's where those young men went. You can see some of the others I've circled. There's another man who was at Wake. I think it's the slide above. Wake Island was known as the Alamo of the Pacific. Roughly 450 Marines held for a week against about 5,000 Japanese, including a naval force. So, and eventually they were captured, and there it is right there. So there's a fraternity brother at Wake Island. Almost none of the Marines at Wake Island survived. You can see some of the other PhD at Cornell, Presidio, San Francisco. These are all of them exchanging these little messages back and forth, just like Facebook, talking about where they're stationed. You know, can you say hello to my wife, etc. You can go to the next slide. Clem, if you could go back to the book and the original red cover up above so I can show the author. That's the man who put this book together, James Jimmy Johnson. He was a fraternity brother. James Jimmy Johnson worked on a cartoon when he was a young student about a princess in the forest, and the cartoon became famous. The name of the cartoon was Snow White. And he was best friends with Roy and Walt Disney, and he was one of the founders of Walt Disney Corporation. And that's why there's a little mouse on the cover. And that is one of the men from that fraternity house. We want to go back, Clem, to the German flag, please. Right there. I'd like to invite my fraternity brother Neil Weichel. The German consulate couldn't make it tonight. They are hosting an event with 60 people, and they only have a 5-person staff. And so I've asked Neil to read the nice letter from the German consulate to the Williams family and to all of you.
Good evening. Quite a story. On behalf of Ms. Andrea Sasse, Consul General of the Federal Republic of Germany in Los Angeles, we extend our heartfelt congratulations to you and to Mr. William Palmer on the occasion of the significant event, Conflict, Captivity, and Peace, on Wednesday, the 13th of November, 2024, during the United States Veterans Day week. It is with sincere regret, due to a prior commitment to a large event on the same day and time, the German Consulate General in Los Angeles will be unable to attend. However, we are deeply appreciative of your kind invitation and extend our warmest wishes to Ms. Diana Williams Kloffenstein, Ms. Thérèse Besson-Moncler, the Office of Congressman Liu, the representatives of the French Consulate General in Los Angeles, UCLA students, staff, and all the attendees for a serene and meaningful ceremony. We are profoundly grateful that the Williams family has found closure and that the American Lieutenant Williams and French Private Besson are receiving the recognition they so rightfully deserve. Please know that our thoughts are with you, and we share in the spirit of friendship and peace that will undoubtedly be present during this solemn event. With deep regards, Danielle Skrelja. Thank you.
And we are very lucky tonight to have a representative from the French Consulate office here tonight. And I'd like to invite him up to speak for just a moment. I struggle with the French names. I want to apologize. Benoît Labat. Labat?
Benoît Labat.
I gave
It was very good.
Thank you, good man. Come up.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dear Abel Valenzuela, Dean of UCLA's Division of Social Sciences, dear Kevin Terracciano, History Department Chair, dear Janet Turner, representative of Congressman Liu, dear Bill Palmer, dear Clément Souiri, dear UCLA students and staff, dear participants, and of course, dear Diana. I am Benoît Labat, the attaché for higher education at the French Consulate. And on behalf of Adrien Frier, our new Consul General, I would like to thank the organizers for this ceremony, and more broadly, all of you taking part today for honoring the memory of men who fought for freedom more than 80 years ago in France. It's a great pleasure and an honor for me to be with you today for this very special ceremony. Thérèse, we're going to listen to Thérèse Pézin just in a moment. And she will be telling us very moving words about how she thinks about, what she feels about the Second World War and the history of her family. And this will remind us how deeply the Second World War is still rooted in our memories. And I have to say that the power of the ceremonies organized in the US every year for Veterans Day is absolutely remarkable. And in France also, we pay tribute to all the victims of the war and to those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our safety and our freedom. And on November 11, a national ceremony was presided over by President Macron, and ceremonies were organized everywhere in France. Today's celebration also comes in a very special year, as we celebrated the 80th anniversary of the D-Day in Normandy last June. Thus, today is also an important opportunity for us to remember that the Franco-American friendship represents, from the War of Independence to the two World Wars and to the present day, our old friendship, as we used to say, is not just between governments and political leaders. It's rooted in individual behaviors and individual stories, like the one we are celebrating today. It's rooted in the commemoration of the men of the Theta Chi fraternity, this commemoration of Lieutenant Williams and of Joseph Pézin, who died without knowing the consequences of his letter. Although I do not think anyone from my generation, which has always known times of peace, can truly imagine all of the challenges Lieutenant Williams, Joseph Pézin, and every soldier overcame, we are truly grateful for the way they faced their destiny. It required incredible courage, a strong sense of duty and self-sacrifice. As you will hear Thérèse Mauclair say, life forces us to take a stand. Let that positioning be taken with awareness, integrity, and love, and it's up to us not to forget those words, those who took a stand, and to keep their legacy alive. Thank you.
I'd like to ask, we have Congressman Liu's office step forward. They've written a statement that has gone into the congressional record for today, commemorating the time that we're spending here tonight. And so Janet Turner is here, the senior director from Congressman Liu's office, and she has something for Diana. And I'd like to invite her to the podium, please.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Hasn't this been inspiring? Good evening, and I send warmest wishes from Congressman Ted Lieu and his sincere appreciation to all those, especially Bill, who were involved in creating this very special Veterans Day ceremony and this very special, wonderful tribute to two World War heroes, U.S. Lieutenant Wesley Williams and the French POW, Joseph Pézin. I'm probably killing the name. As you all know, World War II was arguably the most significant and influential event of the 20th century. World War II involved combatants from most of the world's nations and was considered the deadliest war in history. Total military and civilian deaths were estimated at 70 to 85 million, about 3% of the global population of that time. And it's with our honor that the death of two heroes from that war are being mentioned and honored tonight. And so we would like to to be included in that honor by presenting a congressional record insert. And if you'll bear with me, I would like to read it to Diane.
Janet, would you like to read it at the microphone? You might get up. We've got people in the back.
Thank you. We consider these very special, and so it starts, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to solemnly honor two gallant veterans, Lieutenant Wesley Williams and Private Joseph Pizan. Lieutenant Williams and Private Pizan are to be recognized for their acts of gallantry during World War II at the University of California, Los Angeles Veterans Day ceremony on November 13th, 2024. On the day after December 7th, 1941, the Pearl Harbor attack, 56 members of UCLA chapter, Theta Chi fraternity, met and voted unanimously to enlist in the United States Armed Forces. Among those 56 men who enlisted, 7 men, including Lieutenant Williams, never returned home. Lieutenant Williams was listed as missing in action. On April 5th, 1945, a French prisoner of war, Private Joseph Pizan, wrote to the International Red Cross about a highly decorated, badly wounded American soldier who died in captivity in a German prison camp, Stalag 9. Private Pizan described how this American soldier spoke about his college sweetheart, Patricia Lampton, a member of the UCLA chapter of Alpha Gamma Delta sorority, and the unborn child that the couple were expecting. Private Pizan stated that Lieutenant Williams' remains were buried in an unmarked grave outside the prison camp. Before Lieutenant Williams lost his life, he exhibited bravery and fearless leadership during combat. While his platoon was under attack, Lieutenant Williams left his covered position to aid in the evacuation of the wounded and directed the withdrawal of his platoon. The soldiers that Lieutenant Williams saved in his platoon later liberated Nordhausen concentration camp. At this UCLA Veterans Day ceremony, Lieutenant Williams' daughter, Diana Joyce Williams Klopfenstein, will receive the flag of our grateful country and her father's missing declassified Silver Star Commendation for the valor in combat. Appearing with Diana is the only child of Private Pizan, Madame Therese Montclair, and Private Pizan's compassionate act brought comfort to the lives of 21 families of Allied soldiers buried in unmarked graves outside the prison camp. I respectfully ask my colleagues to join me in remembering these two brave men, Lieutenant Wesley W. Williams and French Private Joseph Pizan, for their heroic actions during World War II. And that was entered in the congressional record forever and ever. So, Diana.
Thank you, Janet. Clement? At this stage, I don't know where did my military honor guard go? Oh, here we are. Thank you, guys. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like you to come forward and present.
Well, since there's no other military, I won't call everyone to attention. The United States of America, by direction of the President and under the provisions of Army Regulations 600-45, 22 September 1943, as amended and pursuant to the authority contained in paragraph 4, section 1, circular number 66, headquarters, 1st United States Army, 18 May 1944. The President has awarded the Silver Star Medal to Lieutenant Williams, United States Army, for gallantry in action in Germany on 21 November 1944. Lieutenant Williams led his platoon while under heavy enemy fire to a position 1/2 mile from their objective in order to attack a strong enemy position manned by self-propelled guns. About 100 yards from the objective, the platoon was pinned to the ground by an intense barrage of enemy artillery and machine gun fire. Suffering many casualties and making a withdrawal necessary, Lieutenant Williams, with complete and utter disregard for his safety, left his covered position and from an exposed point of observation directed the organized withdrawal of his platoon. Lieutenant Williams remained in the forward area, assisting the aid of men in the evacuation of the wounded to ensure that no casualties were unattended. Lieutenant Williams, at great risk of his life and while completely exposed to enemy fire, inspected the entire area and returned to his platoon while being subjected to intense artillery barrage, organized a defensive position, and directed the evacuation of the wounded. Lieutenant Williams' bravery and fearless leadership reflect the highest credit upon himself and the armed forces of the United States. Given under my hand in the city of Los Angeles this 13th day of November, 2024. President, United States of America.
We have two more speakers tonight, and I'll ask Clément to let us hear from the daughter of the French POW in France. This had to be pre-recorded because of the time difference and their ages. I asked her if she wanted to come to Los Angeles. She's so sweet, she and her husband. I don't speak French. It was Clem helping me translate. And she said, "Oh, Bill," she said, it's so far. In a younger time, we would have loved to have come, but well, you know, one little fall and our lives will take a different course. So I'd like to hear from Thérèse, please.
Alors, je m'appelle Thérèse Bezin. Je suis la fille de Joseph Bezin, un prisonnier français, un prisonnier de guerre. Je me sens très honorée et émue d'être associée au nom de mon père à cette commémoration à la mémoire de ces jeunes hommes de la fraternité Tetachi qui ont choisi de défendre leurs valeurs et leurs idéaux au péril de leur vie. L'âge de mon père, quand il est entré dans l'armée, je suppose que c'était 20 ans. Il a été fait prisonnier lors de la bataille de Dunkerque. Il écrit dans son journal qu'il a été affecté dans un commando, le commando 643, le 12 juillet 1940, pour aller travailler dans les fermes. Alors, mon père est resté prisonnier 5 ans. Le 11 février 1945, on est venu chercher mon père sur son lieu de travail pour qu'il se rende en urgence à l'hôpital, qu'un soldat allié, dans un état grave, venait d'y être amené. C'était le lieutenant Williams. Mon père écrit, arrivé à l'hôpital après plusieurs vérifications de compatibilité sanguine, la transfusion fut mise en place. Les blessures du lieutenant Williams, je l'ai trouvé dans les écrits de mon père. Il était blessé au bras droit. Il avait une grosse blessure à la poitrine. Et mon père écrit, c'est à cause de la blessure de la poitrine qu'il est décédé, parce qu'il avait déjà eu une pneumonie juste avant, de seconde transfusion sanguine, car le lieutenant Williams est décédé dès le lendemain matin, le 12 février 1945. Mon père explique dans sa lettre que la condition extrêmement grave dans laquelle il a trouvé le lieutenant l'avait amené à penser qu'il allait être porté disparu. Mais connaissant mon père et sa sensibilité, son type de préoccupation, je pense qu'il avait le souhait que les familles soient officiellement informées du décès de leurs proches et qu'elles puissent faire le deuil et ne pas rester avec un point d'interrogation. Il a écrit à la Croix-Rouge à son retour, après sa captivité, tout de suite à son retour. Mais il n'avait pas de nouvelles. Tout ce qu'il savait, lui, c'est que le lieutenant Williams avait été enterré dans un coin du cimetière de Squelch, là où ils étaient, et avec d'autres soldats alliés et aviateurs, mais sans plus, sans marque, sans rien, enterré comme ça. Le message que j'aimerais exprimer aux délégués du Congrès américain, aux représentants des consulats, ce que je voudrais dire, c'est que la vie nous amène inévitablement à nous positionner. Que l'on soit un individu isolé, un groupe ou un responsable d'une nation, que ce positionnement soit toujours pris en conscience, en intégrité, en pleine justesse et en amour. C'est mon message. Ce que peut-être le message de mon père, je me mets à sa place. Mon père était un homme sensible à la souffrance des autres et il avait soif de paix et d'amour. Son message pourrait être celui-ci: que chaque nation trouve en elle, devant l'adversité, les ressorts du dépassement et du bien commun.
So we have one final speaker. I don't know, I did not see him here, but I also invited Reverend Adam Dawkins from the church over here on Hillgard. And I also invited my friend Rabbi Abe Cooper. Abe, if you want to come up here. Rabbi Cooper has been a dear friend to me for over 20 years, and he's often given me a hand up when others have pushed me down. So I invited Rabbi Cooper from the Simon Wiesenthal Center. He was by my side in Jerusalem when I was negotiating with the German insurance companies on behalf of the Jewish survivors and their children. So I have Rabbi Cooper here, and I have Reverend Dawkins, and I wanted to invite them up to just say a couple quick words. But we just finished a tumultuous election. You know, there were a lot of angry words exchanged back and forth, and there was a lot of disunity. But I want to suggest something to you, which is that I think the time for us to worry is when nobody cares and it's silence. And I always like to think that out in space, all this arguing, all this discord, I suspect out in space where God is, it is probably harmony. And so I wanted to suggest that too. So I asked Reverend Dawkins and Rabbi Cooper, my dear friend, if they could come and just say a couple words of peace, whether you have faith or not, just to have a moment of reflection, of peace and unity. And that's how we'll close tonight.
Good evening. My name is Father Adam Dawkins. I'm the rector of St. Albans Episcopal Church on Hillgard at the corner of West Home here at UCLA. as we gather to give thanks for the life and service of Lieutenant Wesley W. Williams and Private Joseph Pessin. We're reminded that the cost of freedom is dear because the cost of war is so high. And so tonight we honor and salute Lieutenant Williams and Private Pessin and all those who have borne the burdens and paid the price. As precious as our freedom is and as costly as it is for those who have ensured it for us, people of every faith tradition seek refuge in God. Jews and Christians alike have shared and continue to share the sacred words of Psalm 17. Wondrously show your steadfast love, O Savior of those who seek refuge. And so our gathering tonight must be more than a time of remembrance and honor. It's a time when we call to mind that God is our deliverer, that God can heal the pride of sin that inevitably leads to the horror of war. The final and ultimate mission of the combat veteran, the mission entrusted to all people of faith, is to be instruments and agents of grace, mercy, and reconciliation. And so as we enjoy the gifts of freedom, the greatest honor that we can pay to Lieutenant Williams and Private Pessin and all veterans, living and dead, is living the prayer that's attributed to St. Francis. If it is your tradition to pray, I invite you to pray with me now. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to life eternal. Amen.
Good evening. I can't speak for anyone else, but I think this is one of the more humbling experiences. And for those of you who don't know Bill Palmer, you always want to make sure he's your friend. And I think he went into the wrong business, because had he dug for oil, he would probably be a multi-billionaire by now. And he has been a teacher and a mentor every step of the way. Very special human being. Let me say two things. Simon Wiesenthal is our namesake, the Simon Wiesenthal Center over at PICO, where I've had the honor of working since 1977. He said, "Hope lives when people remember." Simon Wiesenthal and his wife Sila lost 89 members of their family during the Nazi Holocaust. When he was liberated at the Mauthausen concentration camp in May 1945 by United States troops, he was too weak to stand. In fact, the doctor said another 10 days he would have starved to death. But I want to, for those of you who've never been to our museum, I want to suggest that when you come, look out for a special flag that we have at the Museum of Tolerance. It was given to us by a gentleman who, of course, was born in Defiance, Ohio. A GI who fought across Europe and saw all the horrors, and then he and his team stumbled on Mauthausen, where people have been tortured, even the living were near death. No one prepared any GI for what they saw in places like Dachau and Dora. and Mauthausen. So why do I tell you about this flag? It's got a great story, and I'm inspired by what Bill just said. In the weeks leading up to the end of the war, the people, the innocents who were locked up in this death camp, were beginning to hear that thing, it was going to end soon enough. But they weren't sure if the Russian army was going to make it in Austria or the Americans. And there were people from 20 different nations in there. So they decided that they were going to sew an American flag and hide it until they were liberated, hopefully by the United States of America. So a number of people remembered that there were 13 original colonies, so they got that part. No one had any idea how many states there were. So when you come and see this flag, you will see that it has 53 stars. And when the officer from Defiance, Ohio, came in, the people from these nations mustered themselves and walked to deliver the flag to the United States of America. People like Simon Wiesenthal, the Jews, mostly, were too weak to walk. And many decades later, this Ohioan was smart enough to retire to Southern California, and eventually he donated the flag that flew over the liberated camp for the first 30 days, and this coming May will be the 80th anniversary of liberation, and we prepared facsimile of that flag at the request of the U.S. Ambassador Kennedy in Austria, and that flag will fly that day again. And so what's important about that message is if the people from across Europe who were incarcerated in that hellhole thought what would be the greatest symbol of hope and of a future for them, our flag. Thank you.
I have one last speaker, and I'm so grateful he could make it on last minute notice. And then I have a small gesture from the Theta Chi fraternity for Diana, but we're lucky to have Muhammad Khan here on behalf of the Islamic faith, and he would like to give a small chant or a small prayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Greetings of peace. Shalom alaikum. Salam alaikum. I have 3 vets in my family, one a Vietnam vet, and this is honoring our heroes. They're people who put their lives on the line, they sacrifice, they go through things that's beyond our imagination so that all of us can taste freedom. And just to share a quick story, I met Senator McCain at random, and was visiting here in a hotel lobby, and I see Senator McCain. So I go up to the senator and I said, "Senator, can I ask you a question? It's not political, it's just a question." He said, "Go ahead." I said, what kept you and your mind sane when you were a prisoner of war? And then he looked at me, he said, no one's asked me that question. And he thought about it, and he said, my faith in God. And I thanked the senator. I said, our nation's fortunate to have a leader like you who also went back and forgave those people who tortured him. My brother was a Navy corpsman in Vietnam. He came back, was never the same. And so I think people who have faith, faith is a power beyond what we can understand. And all of us are created with divine light. All of us have our own special link with the Almighty. So I'll just end with a prayer of peace. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik ya Kareem ya Salam. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. God, we begin in your name. You are the most compassionate, the most merciful. Oh God, help us remember you, worship you, and say thanks to you in the noblest of ways. You are the source of all peace. Oh God, preserve all of our soldiers around the world. Send inner peace upon them and honor all our veterans. We ask you, God, to let us be your tools of promoting peace, spreading peace, and making peace a reality. Thank you. All three of you. And we have one small last gesture. The flower of Theta Chi fraternity, which was Diana's father's, Wes Williams fraternity, is a red carnation. And so all the young men of the chapter came over tonight dressed in their best coat and tie. I'm so proud of you guys. And what's interesting is they're roughly the same age as your father was when he passed, which was age 22. He would have been in his senior year.
If I was younger, this could be the dating game.
Yes. So there we go. So I want to invite them forward. They have something for you, Diana, and just to add to all your presence tonight. Hey, we could get behind her and take a nice picture of all you. Thank you for making this effort. Thank you, good man. Just maybe form a group behind or pull in next to Jay here so we can get everyone behind and around, surround them. And gentlemen, let's jam in here and get everyone behind them as best we can. Turn off the projector. Yeah, you want to turn off. Clem, you want to shut off the projector, please?
Engagement rings.
Perfect. Yeah, can you shut the projector off all the way? Okay, we may have to just go with what we've got, I'm sorry. Just move over a little bit. Perfect. Oh, wait. We got the screen. Let's take a couple more now that we got that screen. Away. Thank you.
It's okay, you're fine.
Perfect. Thanks.
Well, good evening. Nice to see you. Family okay? Everything good?
I'll come by and see you. I got a little present for you. You and that.
Plotting, so.
come by. And that concludes tonight. Oh,
I have such a small token of appreciation, but I thought it was fitting.
come over around.
Oops, oops, oops.
Go ahead.
And it's not what you might think,
Thank you.
although you probably deserve it. This has certainly been a special evening for my husband and myself. Bill and I have talked over the phone. I feel like we're friends and I want to continue the friendship. And he did an excellent job. I know he had help, he had to. Anyway, this is for you. Go ahead and open it.
Thank you.
We were at Tahoe this summer at a timeshare in a gift shop, and this just caught our attention.
Land, it's,
No,
a-
no, no.
go ahead.
Just open it up. Men need help.
It says, land of the free because of the brave. Now, we have one last little treat for everyone. Peter Evans, before he said, Bill, we'll set up a hosted UCLA-style bar for you. And I said to Peter, I said, what is a UCLA-style bar? And he said, it means cheap wine and beer. So if we'd like to have a drink, there's a little hosted event for us, a little reception. And I want to thank you all for sharing these moments of time. And to conclude, this is to answer the question, what is history? This is the meaning of history right here. We've left the campsite a little cleaner than we found it. Thank you.